You think 1970s soul food was just fried chicken and collard greens? Think again. Black kitchens across America served up dishes so bold and deeply tied to survival that most have vanished entirely. Let's dig into 30 soul food recipes from the 1970s they'll never serve again. Hog maw stuffed with sausage was the centerpiece of holiday tables in black households throughout the 1970s, a dish that demanded respect and patience in equal measure. The hog stomach was cleaned meticulously for hours, then stuffed with seasoned sausage, potatoes, onions, and cabbage before slow roasting until golden and crisp. This dish filled homes with an aroma that announced celebration. Families gathered as it was sliced thick and served alongside greens, each portion carrying the richness of rendered fat and spiced meat. The stomach itself cost almost nothing, yet transformed into something that fed a crowd and honored tradition. Today, it has nearly disappeared, but those who remember it recall the pride of serving something so deeply rooted in heritage. Chitterlings with hot sauce carried the weight of history in every bite, a dish born from necessity that became a celebration of resilience. Pig intestines were cleaned for hours, boiled slowly with onions, garlic, vinegar, and bay leaves until tender, then served steaming with hot sauce that cut through the richness. The smell was unmistakable, filling kitchens and drifting through neighborhoods. In the 1970s, chitterlings appeared at holiday gatherings and Sunday dinners where elders passed down the knowledge of proper preparation. The texture was chewy and gelatinous, the flavor deep and earthy, balanced by vinegar and heat. Though many younger generations have never tasted them, chitterlings remain a symbol of making treasure from what others discarded. Neck bones and rice was a weeknight staple that stretched a few dollars into a meal hearty enough for an entire family. During the 1970s, pork neck bones were browned in a heavy pot, then slow simmered with onions, garlic, and seasoning until the meat fell from the bone. The bones released marrow and collagen, creating natural gravy that clung to every grain of rice. This was not fancy food, but deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that warmed from the inside. Mothers made it when the pantry was thin, knowing neck bones cost pennies, yet delivered flavor that expensive cuts could never match. Children learned to gnaw the bones clean, savoring every bit of meat. This dish taught that dignity and deliciousness could come from the humblest ingredients. Cracklin bread was cornbread elevated to something extraordinary, studded with crispy bits of rendered pork fat that added crunch and richness to every bite. When families butchered hogs or rendered lard, the crispy pieces left behind were folded into cornmeal batter before baking in cast iron skillets. The bread emerged golden and fragrant, with pockets of salty, crunchy pork scattered throughout the tender crumb. It was served hot alongside beans, greens, or stews that soaked up its richness. Cracklin bread represented the waste-nothing philosophy of black kitchens. Children fought over the corner pieces where extra cracklings had crisped against the pan. This bread has largely disappeared as home hog butchering faded, but its memory lingers among those who tasted it. Oxtail stew with butter beans was Sunday dinner royalty, a dish that required time and attention, but rewarded with flavors that seemed to echo through generations. Oxtails were seared until caramelized, then braised slowly with tomatoes, onions, garlic, thyme, and allspice until the meat surrendered from the bone. Butter beans were added in the final hour, absorbing the rich gravy while holding their shape. The marrow from the bones melted into the sauce, creating natural richness that no store-bought product could replicate. Served over rice or with crusty bread, This stew was reserved for occasions that mattered. Those who mastered oxtail stew earned reputations that spread through churches and neighborhoods, their pots requested at every gathering. Salmon croquettes were the answer to tight budgets, transforming a can of salmon into crispy golden patties that made breakfast or dinner feel complete. The canned fish was mixed with eggs, onions, flour, and seasoning, then shaped into ovals and fried until the outside crackled with each bite. Inside, the salmon stayed moist and flaky. These croquettes appeared on tables across Black America in the 1970s, served with grits for breakfast or rice for supper. Canned salmon was affordable and shelf-stable, making it reliable when fresh meat was beyond reach. Mothers learned to stretch one can to feed 5 people. The smell of salmon croquettes, sizzling in cast iron, became the soundtrack of countless mornings, a familiar comfort that signaled a warm start to the day. Smothered liver and onions divided households, but fed families with iron-rich protein when budgets were tight. Beef or pork liver was sliced thin, soaked in milk to temper its metallic edge, then dredged in seasoned flour and fried until golden. Mountains of sliced onions were cooked down in the same skillet until they collapsed into sweet, caramelized strands, then piled atop the liver with rich gravy poured over everything. The combination was earthy and savory, with onions providing sweetness that balanced the liver's intensity. In the 1970s, liver was among the cheapest proteins available, appearing regularly on weeknight tables. Children often resisted until that first bite revealed something surprisingly delicious. This dish remains a memory of skill, transforming humble ingredients into meals worth remembering. Turkey wings and gravy made ordinary weeknights feel like holidays, delivering the richness of Thanksgiving without the expense of a whole bird. The massive wings were seasoned generously with garlic, paprika, and black pepper, then browned before being braised until the meat fell from the bone. The cooking liquid transformed into silky gravy enriched by rendered fat and collagen. Served over rice or alongside cornbread, this dish stretched a few pounds of turkey wings to feed a family of 6. The meat was tender and flavorful, carrying all the satisfaction of roasted turkey at a fraction of the price. Turkey wings were often overlooked at the butcher counter, making them affordable for families counting pennies. This dish proved that celebration did not require extravagance. Poke salad was wild food that connected Black families to the land and knowledge of generations past. Poke weed grew along roadsides, fences, and forest edges across the South. Its young leaves gathered each spring before they became toxic. The greens required careful preparation, boiled multiple times with water discarded to remove dangerous compounds before being sautéed with bacon drippings, onions, and eggs. The flavor was earthy and slightly bitter, carrying the taste of foraging traditions that stretched back centuries. Gathering poke was a springtime ritual, with elders teaching children exactly which leaves to pick and how to prepare them safely. In the 1970s, poke salad still appeared on tables across rural Black communities. Today, few remember how to prepare it safely, making this dish a nearly lost connection to ancestral wisdom. Fried chicken gizzards were a beloved snack that turned an often discarded organ into something crispy, chewy, and irresistible. The muscular stomachs were cleaned, boiled until tender, then dredged in seasoned flour and dropped into hot oil until golden brown. The exterior shattered with each bite while the inside remained dense and meaty, with flavor more intense than regular chicken. In the 1970s, gizzards appeared at fish fries, corner stores, and family kitchens, where nothing from the bird went to waste. Children ate them from paper bags with toothpicks, dipping each piece in hot sauce. Adults savored them as the cook's reward, eaten standing at the stove. The price was negligible since butchers practically gave them away. Fried gizzards taught that rejected parts could become treasures. Lima bean and ham stew was a thick, creamy bowl of comfort that stretched a small amount of meat into a meal for the whole family. Dried lima beans were soaked overnight, then simmered with chunks of leftover ham or a ham bone until everything melded into something greater than its parts. The beans broke down slightly during cooking, naturally thickening the broth into a consistency almost like gravy. Onions, garlic, and black pepper provided seasoning, while celery and carrots added sweetness and color. Some families mashed a portion of the beans against the pot to make things heartier. This stew was weeknight fare, simple to prepare but deeply satisfying when served over rice or with cornbread. The ham flavor permeated every bite, making even the plainest bean taste special. Chitlin loaf took the intense flavor of chitterlings and transformed them into something sliceable and easier for skeptics to approach. Cleaned and cooked chitterlings were ground or chopped fine, mixed with cornmeal, eggs, onions, and seasonings, then packed into loaf pans and baked until firm. The result was dense and savory, with the distinctive chitlin flavor mellowed by the cornmeal binder. Sliced and fried until crispy on the outside, chitlin loaf became breakfast alongside eggs or dinner with greens. This dish represented innovation born from tradition, finding new ways to enjoy ancestral foods. In the 1970s, chitlin loaf appeared at church suppers and family gatherings. The dish has nearly vanished, known only to those who remember kitchens where creativity transformed humble ingredients. Ham hocks and black-eyed peas was New Year's Day tradition, and weeknight sustenance rolled into one pot. The smoked hocks simmered for hours, releasing their salty, smoky essence into dried peas that absorbed every bit of flavor. Onions, garlic, and bay leaves joined the pot, while some cooks added vinegar or hot sauce for brightness. The peas turned creamy while holding their shape, swimming in pot liquor rich enough to be a meal on its own. Served over rice with cornbread for sopping, this dish promised luck when eaten on New Year's, but delivered satisfaction any day. Ham hocks cost almost nothing, yet flavored entire pots of food. This dish carried superstition and survival in equal measure, connecting families to traditions that stretch back generations. Fried corn with bacon was summer captured in a skillet, celebrating the brief weeks when fresh corn overflowed from gardens and roadside stands. Kernels were cut from the cob, then scraped to release the milky liquid that would thicken the dish. Bacon was fried until crisp, then crumbled while the corn cooked in the rendered fat, caramelizing slightly at the edges. Onion, salt, and pepper were all the seasoning needed when the corn was this fresh. The dish came together quickly, but delivered sweetness, smoke, and richness in every spoonful. In the 1970s, fried corn appeared at summer cookouts and weeknight suppers when gardens produced more than families could eat fresh. This was seasonal cooking at its purest, impossible to replicate with frozen corn. Chicken gizzard stew turned an often discarded organ into something families genuinely looked forward to eating. Gizzards were cheap at the butcher counter, sold by the pound for far less than other chicken parts. They required long cooking to become tender, but that time transformed their chewy texture into something almost silky. The gizzards were browned first, then simmered with onions, garlic, tomatoes, and potatoes until everything melded together. Some cooks added carrots or celery, while others kept it simple with salt, pepper, and bay leaves. The gravy that formed was dark and rich, perfect for ladling over rice or biscuits. Children who grew up eating this stew developed a taste for organ meats early. The dish represented kitchen wisdom, knowledge that parts others threw away could become dinner. Neckbone stew with potatoes was cold weather comfort that simmered all day and fed families all week. Pork neck bones were browned until caramelized, then covered with water and cooked slowly with onions, garlic, and bay leaves. Potatoes and carrots were added in the final hours, absorbing the rich broth flavored by marrow and rendered fat. The meat became so tender it slid from the bone, while the potatoes broke down slightly to thicken the stew naturally. Served in deep bowls with crusty bread or cornbread, this stew warmed bodies and spirits during the coldest months. Mothers started the pot before dawn, letting it bubble gently while they worked, filling homes with aromas that drew children to the kitchen. Neckbone stew taught that time and patience were ingredients as important as anything bought at the store. Fried pork chops with sawmill gravy was a dish that made ordinary weeknights feel like celebrations. The chops were seasoned simply with salt and pepper, dredged in flour, and fried in a cast iron skillet until the crust turned golden and the meat stayed juicy inside. The drippings left behind became the foundation for sawmill gravy. Flour stirred into the hot fat, then milk added slowly while scraping up every flavorful bit stuck to the pan. The gravy was poured over the chops and served with rice or biscuits that soaked up the creamy, peppery sauce. In the 1970s, this dish appeared on tables across Black America, affordable enough for any budget, yet satisfying enough to make everyone feel fed. The gravy stretched the meal, turning 2 pork chops into dinner for 4 when served over enough starch. Pig feet stew was hearty winter fare that transformed an overlooked cut into something families craved when temperatures dropped. The feet were split, cleaned thoroughly, and simmered for hours until the skin became tender and natural gelatin thickened the broth into something luxurious. Onions, garlic, vinegar, and crushed red pepper created a tangy heat that cut through the richness. Some families added potatoes or beans to stretch the meal. The stew was made in large batches because it kept well and improved after sitting overnight in the refrigerator. The gelatin would set into a jiggly mass that liquefied again when reheated. This dish required patience. Rushing meant tough, chewy results. Children watched mothers and grandmothers tend these pots, learning that good food took time. Pig feet stew proved nothing went to waste. Stuffed bell peppers with rice transformed garden vegetables into complete meals that were beautiful enough for company. Large peppers were hollowed and filled with a mixture of ground beef, rice, tomatoes, onions, and seasonings, then baked until the peppers softened and the filling bubbled. The juices from the meat mingled with the tomatoes to create a sauce that pooled in the baking dish, perfect for spooning over each serving. Some families topped theirs with cheese in the final minutes, adding richness to an already satisfying dish. In the 1970s, stuffed peppers appeared at church suppers and Sunday dinners, showing how creativity stretched a pound of meat to feed a family. The peppers came from backyard gardens in summer, making the dish nearly free when produce was abundant. This was food that honored both thrift and presentation. Fried catfish with hot water cornbread was a pairing so perfect it defined Southern Black cooking. The catfish fillets were soaked in buttermilk, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, and fried until the coating crackled with each bite, while the flesh inside stayed moist and sweet. Hot water cornbread was made by pouring boiling water over cornmeal, forming the dough into small patties and frying them until crisp outside and tender within. Together, they created a meal of textures and flavors that satisfied on the deepest level. In the 1970s, fish fries brought entire communities together on Friday nights and summer weekends. The catfish came from local rivers and ponds, caught by fathers and grandfathers who passed down fishing knowledge along with recipes. This pairing represented abundance pulled directly from southern waters. Kidney stew was a dish that required courage to try, but rewarded adventurous eaters with rich, complex flavors. Pork or beef kidneys were cleaned, carefully soaked to remove any strong taste, then sliced and browned before simmering with onions, tomatoes, and seasonings. The meat turned tender and absorbed the gravy's flavors while contributing its own mineral richness to the pot. Served over rice or with bread to soak up the sauce, kidney stew provided iron and protein at a fraction of the cost of regular meat. In the 1970s, organ meats appeared regularly on tables where stretching the grocery budget was a necessity. Grandmothers who knew how to prepare kidneys properly earned reputations for their skill, turning what others rejected into something genuinely delicious. This dish has nearly disappeared, but deserves to be remembered. Smothered cabbage with smoked turkey proved vegetables could be just as satisfying as meat when cooked with care. A whole head of cabbage was sliced and cooked slowly with smoked turkey wings until it absorbed every bit of smoky richness. Onions, garlic, and a splash of vinegar brightened the dish, while the turkey's rendered fat made the cabbage silky and tender. Served alongside cornbread, this was a complete meal that cost almost nothing yet delivered a deep satisfaction. In the 1970s, smothered cabbage appeared on weeknight tables when budgets were stretched thin, but flavor could not be sacrificed. The dish showed how Black cooks elevated simple vegetables into something worthy of second helpings. The smoked turkey made all the difference, proving that a little meat could transform an entire pot. Fried chicken livers were a delicacy that divided opinions, but united those who loved their rich, creamy interior beneath a crispy shell. The livers were soaked in buttermilk to mellow their intensity, then dredged in seasoned flour and fried quickly in hot oil until golden outside while staying pink and tender within. The flavor was mineral and earthy, offset by the crunch of the coating and the tang of hot sauce served alongside. In the 1970s, fried livers appeared at soul food restaurants, fish fries, and home kitchens where organ meats were valued for their nutrition and low cost. Children sometimes resisted until that first bite revealed something surprisingly delicious. Adults ate them as appetizers or piled them over rice for a full meal. Fried chicken livers taught that the parts others passed by often held the deepest flavors. Beef hot stew was not for the squeamish, but those who grew up eating it remember the rich, almost beefy flavor that no other cut could match. The heart was trimmed of fat and tough valves, then cubed and browned before being covered with liquid and left to simmer. The meat was dense and lean, requiring long cooking to become tender, but the result was deeply satisfying. Onions, carrots, potatoes, and tomatoes stretched the stew while adding sweetness and color. Some cooks added Worcestershire sauce for depth, while others let the meat speak for itself. This stew appeared on tables when money was especially tight, organ meats costing far less than regular cuts. Children learned not to ask what was in the pot, just to eat what was served with gratitude. Hoghead cheese was not cheese at all, but a savory meat jelly made from the head of a pig, a dish that showcased the nose-to-tail cooking philosophy of Black kitchens. The hog's head was cleaned and simmered for hours with onions, garlic, bay leaves, and vinegar until every bit of Meat fell from the bone. The meat was chopped fine, seasoned with hot pepper and sage, then packed into molds and covered with the cooking liquid. As it chilled, the natural gelatin set everything into a sliceable loaf that was eaten cold on crackers or bread. In the 1970s, Hoghead cheese appeared at family gatherings and was sold at meat markets in black neighborhoods. The flavor was rich and porky with a texture that some found strange but others craved. This dish has nearly vanished, but represents the ingenuity of cooks who wasted nothing. Blackberry cobbler was summer's sweetest reward, made from berries gathered wild along fence rows and forest edges. Children picked the fruit with stained fingers, filling buckets that were carried home for transformation into bubbling dessert. The berries were tossed with sugar and poured into buttered baking dishes, then topped with biscuit dough before baking until the fruit bubbled and the crust turned golden. Served warm with cold milk or vanilla ice cream, the cobbler balanced tart berries with sweet crust in every spoonful. In the 1970s, Blackberry cobbler appeared at church suppers, family reunions, and Sunday dinners when berries were in season. The dish required no expensive ingredients, just free fruit and pantry staples. Blackberry cobbler represented the connection between black families and the land that sustained them. Baked possum with sweet potatoes was a dish that seems unthinkable today, but was once a legitimate part of Southern black foodways. The animal was cleaned and soaked to remove gaminess, then stuffed with onions and herbs before being surrounded by sweet potatoes and slow roasted until tender. The meat was dark and rich, somewhere between pork and game, while the sweet potatoes caramelized in the rendered fat. In rural communities during the 1970s, possum was free protein for families who hunted and trapped, making it a practical choice when money for store-bought meat was scarce. The dish appeared at special occasions in some households, prepared by elders who remembered when such cooking was common. Today, it has vanished almost completely, remembered only by those who grew up in communities where wild game supplemented the table. Fried green tomatoes with bacon grease was a dish that turned unripe fruit into something crispy, tangy, and irresistible. Firm green tomatoes were sliced thick, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, and fried in bacon drippings until the coating turned golden and crunchy while the interior stayed tart and slightly firm. The bacon grease added smokiness that elevated the tomatoes beyond what plain oil could achieve. In the 1970s, fried green tomatoes appeared on breakfast plates alongside eggs and bacon, or as side dishes at dinner when the garden produced faster than fruit could ripen. The dish was especially popular at the end of growing season when frost threatened and green tomatoes had to be harvested. This was practical cooking that transformed what might have been waste into a beloved tradition that honored the garden's abundance. Molasses stacked cake was a towering dessert that appeared at celebrations when sugar was scarce, but molasses was plentiful. Thin layers of spiced cake were stacked high with dried apple filling spread between each one, the whole structure left to rest until the flavors melded and the layers softened. The cake was dense and deeply flavored, more about spice and fruit than sweetness. In the 1970s, stacked cakes appeared at church homecomings, family reunions, and holiday gatherings in black communities across the South. Each layer required patience to bake, making the finished cake a labor of love. The molasses gave everything a dark, complex sweetness, while dried apples added tang and moisture. This cake has nearly vanished from modern tables, but those who remember it recall something extraordinary. Community fish fries brought neighborhoods together around freshly caught catfish, cooked in massive outdoor kettles. Men who knew local rivers supplied the fish, cleaning them while women prepared cornmeal batter and heated oil over wood fires. The social dimension mattered as much as food because these gatherings strengthened bonds and created shared memories. Children ran between tables while elders sat telling stories, and everyone ate fish so fresh it had been swimming that morning. The cornmeal coating crisped in properly heated oil, the flesh inside stayed moist, and the entire experience felt like celebration. When these community events became rare, soul food lost one of its essential contexts. The fish we eat now may be fried correctly, but it cannot replicate what those gatherings meant.
Deviled eggs with paprika and pickle relish were the appetizer children fought over at every Thanksgiving gathering, their bright yellow centers dotted with red paprika creating tiny works of art. Grandmothers would boil dozens of eggs the night before, peeling them while warm and slicing lengthwise before scooping yolks into mixing bowls. The yolks were mashed with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, sweet pickle relish, and vinegar until perfectly creamy, then spooned back into egg white halves. Paprika sprinkled on top added color and smokiness. In Black households during the 1970s, deviled eggs symbolized celebration, appearing at every gathering from church dinners to reunions. Children would hover near the kitchen, waiting to sneak one before dinner, knowing that once adults arrived, these treats would disappear. The combination of creamy richness, tangy pickle brightness, and paprika's heat satisfied everyone.
Collard greens from the garden carried sweetness and tenderness in the 1970s that shipped in bunches have lost entirely. Families planted collards in spring and fall, harvesting leaves at their peak after the first frost converted their starches to sugar. These greens were massive, deep green, and so fresh they squeaked when washed. Cooking them was an all-day affair, simmering low with smoked meat until they became silky and rich with potlikker worth drinking alone. The taste was simultaneously bitter, sweet, and savory in a balance that grocery store collards cannot achieve. Children who grew up eating garden collards developed a taste that mass-produced versions could never satisfy. The connection between soil, season, and table gave these greens meaning beyond nutrition, making them taste like heritage itself.
Grease gravy rice was what people cooked when they refused to let anything go to waste. When breakfast meats were done frying, the leftover grease became treasure. A spoon of flour went in first, sizzling and popping until it turned golden. Then milk or water got poured in, slow and steady, until it thickened into smooth gravy. That hot gravy poured over white rice made something out of nearly nothing. It was salty, creamy, and smoky all at once. The smell filled the house and the taste filled the stomach. Parents called it breakfast, but it could carry a family through an entire day. It came from kitchens that knew survival like a second language, where flavor was earned from thrift and patience. Kids grew up thinking it was comfort food, not knowing it was born from rationing and struggle. Grease gravy rice was more than a recipe. It was a declaration that no meal was too small to matter. Every bite was a promise that the family would eat, even when times were lean. It was humble food that carried pride on a spoon. Cowpea fritters were a dish that came straight out of resilience and memory, with roots reaching back to African cooking traditions. Families would soak and mash dried cowpeas, mix them with a little onion, cornmeal, and seasoning, then fry the mixture in hot lard until crisp on the outside and soft inside. They were cheap, filling, and carried the rich protein that many households could not always get from meat. For Black families in the South, cowpeas were already a staple crop, so using them to create something hearty made perfect sense. These fritters could be eaten plain or dipped in gravy, and they were often made in batches large enough to last a day or two. They carried a deep sense of history, because this kind of cooking showed how old world techniques adapted to the realities of hard times in America. They were not only nourishment, but also a connection to ancestors who had relied on the same beans for strength. Rumaki-wrapped chicken livers and water chestnuts in bacon created sophisticated bites that curious children tried, the crispy bacon exterior making them willing to taste the unfamiliar liver that turned out mild. Aunties would cut chicken livers into bite-sized pieces, marinate them briefly in soy sauce and ginger, then wrap them with water chestnut slices in bacon before securing everything with toothpicks. The bundles were arranged on baking sheets and roasted until the bacon crisped and rendered, the fat keeping the liver moist while adding smoky saltiness that transformed the organ meat into something special. As they cooked, the soy sauce caramelized slightly, creating a sweet savory glaze that coated the bacon. In Black households during the 1970s, rumaki represented culinary adventurousness, recipes borrowed from magazines that brought international flavors to holiday tables. Children who were brave enough to try them discovered that bacon really did make everything better. Corn husk pudding was dessert for those who knew how to make the earth sweet. Fresh corn was grated by hand until the bowl filled with golden pulp, then mixed with butter, brown sugar, and milk. The batter was spooned into husks and tied with twine before being steamed until tender. When peeled open, the pudding glowed with a soft yellow shine, smelling of sugar and summer air. Its texture was smooth, its flavor deep and gentle. Families made it for celebrations or simply to remember happier days. It was the kind of sweetness that did not rush, a joy built slowly over a simmering pot. The husks were more than wrappers. They were vessels of gratitude, holding together flavor, memory, and time. Each bite tasted like sunshine, patience, and the steady hands that never stopped creating beauty from simplicity. Corn husk pudding was proof that sweetness does not need gold or cream, only the wisdom to cherish what you already have. It was the song of Southern kitchens, tender and enduring. Shrimp cocktail served in small cups with tangy cocktail sauce was elegant finger food that made children feel sophisticated. The cold, tender shrimp dipped in spicy sweet sauce, creating flavors that seemed fancy. Mothers would boil shrimp in seasoned water with Old Bay seasoning, lemon, and bay leaves until they turned pink and curled, then plunge them into ice water to stop the cooking. Once chilled, the shrimp were peeled and deveined, their tails left on for easy handling, then arranged around small cups filled with cocktail sauce made from ketchup, horseradish, lemon juice, and Worcestershire sauce. The cocktail sauce had a sharp, tangy kick that balanced the shrimp's natural sweetness, creating combinations that felt restaurant quality. In the 1970s, Black households, shrimp cocktail represented luxury and celebration, an appetizer that elevated holiday gatherings. Children loved shrimp cocktail because they could hold the shrimp by the tail and dip them like French fries. Stewed okra and tomatoes were the kind of dish that took simple garden produce and turned it into something nourishing enough to feed a family. Okra, a vegetable with African origins, thrived in southern soil, while tomatoes grew easily in backyard gardens. Together, simmered slowly with onions, spices, and sometimes a scrap of salt pork, they created a stew that was tangy, savory, and thick. Families relied on it because it stretched small harvests into larger meals, often served over rice or with cornbread to make it filling. The dish was especially important when meat was too expensive to buy, as it added depth and nutrition without needing animal protein. Stewed okra and tomatoes became more than food. They were a way to survive with what the land provided. For many, the taste carried reminders of summer gardens and the hard work it took to keep families fed. It was frugal, delicious, and a perfect example of survival cooking. Ash cake bread was born out of fire and hunger, a recipe that came alive in the heart of hard times. Cornmeal, salt, and water were all it needed. The dough was pressed together by hand and buried right into the hot ashes of a wood fireplace. It baked slowly, the outside hardening into a smoky crust, while the inside stayed soft, golden, and warm. When it came out, people brushed away the ashes, broke it open, and drizzled it with syrup or molasses. It had a taste that was both sweet and earthy, like the memory of home on a Sunday morning. Ash cake bread was a working person's meal, something you could make after a long day without needing an oven or a fancy pan. It was food that did not waste or wait. made for those who had nothing extra but still found comfort in what little they had. The smell of it filled small cabins and quiet kitchens, the sound of the crackling fire mixing with laughter or prayer. Every crumb reminded people that strength could grow even from ashes. Green tomato slices served with remoulade sauce were crispy, tangy bites that introduced children to Southern traditions, the cornmeal coating providing crunch while the tart tomato inside stayed firm and flavorful. Mothers would slice green tomatoes thick, dredge them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour and spices, then fry them in hot oil until golden brown and crispy. The remoulade sauce was made from mayonnaise, mustard, pickles, capers, and spices, creating a tangy, creamy dip that complemented the fried tomatoes perfectly. Each slice was served hot with a small dish of sauce for dipping, the combination of temperatures and textures making every bite interesting. In 1970s, Black households, fried green tomatoes represented end-of-season resourcefulness, using tomatoes that wouldn't ripen before frost to create something delicious. Children loved fried green tomatoes because they were crispy like French fries but tasted tangy and different, expanding their understanding of what vegetables could be. Blackberry molasses cobbler was a sticky, smoky dessert that belonged to cast-iron skillets and long summer nights. The berries were gathered wild from fence lines and hedges, their juice staining fingers and laughter alike. Mixed with thick, dark molasses and a handful of sugar, they turned into a bubbling, fragrant filling. The crust was poured over top, sometimes biscuit dough, sometimes batter, and baked until the edges burned just enough to taste like smoke. It was messy and imperfect, but that was part of its beauty. The syrup thickened into a glossy black glaze that clung to every bite, sweet with a whisper of bitterness. People spooned it hot into bowls, sometimes with milk or cream, but it never needed help. Blackberry molasses cobbler tasted like work and reward, like something earned under the sun. It was the dessert that reminded families that sweetness could survive the hardest days, that joy could bubble up even from thorns. Butter beans cooked with ham hock and served in small cups became hearty appetizers that filled hungry children before dinner, their creamy texture and smoky flavor creating comfort in every spoonful. Grandmothers would simmer dried butter beans with ham hocks, onions, and seasonings for hours until the beans became tender and creamy while absorbing the smoky, salty flavor from the meat. The finished beans were served in small portions in cups or bowls with small spoons, allowing guests to enjoy them without needing plates. Some families topped the beans with crumbled cornbread or a drizzle of hot sauce for extra flavor and texture. In Black households during the 1970s, butter beans represented soul food tradition brought to the appetizer table, showing that holiday food could honor heritage while fitting modern entertaining formats. Children loved butter beans because they tasted familiar and comforting, like Thanksgiving dinner in miniature form that warmed them from the inside. Fried mustard greens with cornbread was a savory pairing that many families leaned on as a breakfast, though it was eaten at other times of day too. Mustard greens, boiled until tender, were seasoned with bits of pork fat or salt for flavor. Eaten alongside hot cornbread, the meal balanced vitamins with starch, offering both nutrition and energy. It was cheap, filling, and deeply tied to tradition. For children, the bitterness of the greens was often softened by crumbling cornbread into the Potlikker broth, making it more palatable. Adults valued it as a sustaining meal that honored resourcefulness and cultural heritage. Mustard greens with cornbread symbolized strength and survival, representing the kind of food that nourished more than just hunger. It was humble, but it carried families through mornings when resources were thin, but resolve was strong. This dish was one of the quiet backbones of community kitchens, a reflection of endurance and resilience during times of hardship.
Rendered bacon fat stored in jars beside every stove was the secret weapon of 1970s soul food that modern kitchens have abandoned. This precious grease, saved from breakfast and accumulated over weeks, added smoky depth to vegetables and gravies that no other fat could provide. Cooks spooned it into cast iron before frying eggs, stirred it into green beans, and used it to start dishes that would otherwise taste flat. The fat carried concentrated pork flavor, transforming simple ingredients into something memorable. Children watched their mothers strain hot bacon grease into waiting containers, learning that waste was unacceptable and flavor worth saving. When health concerns eliminated this practice, soul food lost an essential flavor foundation. The dishes we make now without rendered fat are missing what made them worth eating. Which of these forgotten soul food dishes would you bring back? Drop your memories in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more flavors from the past.